Joining us now to discuss former New York City prosecutor Paul Callan, former CIA intelligence officer David Priess. If I could begin with you, Paul, lots of developments yesterday, some inside the courtroom, some out. So outside the courtroom, Trump on his social media channel taking issue with this photo that showed the evidence the FBI collected, said, well, no, I mean, we didn't keep it on the floor. We kept it in cartons, which is the president acknowledging that classified documents were kept. And we should note, after his lawyer said they'd returned everything. Is that material to the ongoing investigation?
Well, it is material in the sense that it's confirmation that he had in his possession these highly classified documents. And even if he waved a magic wand over them and said they're not classified, they're still defense and military information. And there are statutes making it a crime for somebody to hold or conceal those documents. And I have to say, Jim, the question that people have been asking me all day yesterday after this is, what in the world was he doing with over 300 pages of classified documents at Mar-a-Lago after he's left office? Is he going to use it for wallpaper there? I mean, is he going to show it to friends and family who dined with him? Why should an ex-president of the United States have sensitive classified documents like this in unsecured areas of his personal residence? That's an answer I think maybe we'll see when we have a hearing later today.
David, you are a former CIA intelligence officer, so you clearly have a deep understanding of the importance of classification, the different levels of it. Some of these, as we saw in that photo, were near the top of the classification list. The Trump legal team argued in this filing last night, quote, simply put, the notion that presidential records would contain sensitive information should never have been a cause for alarm. They are essentially saying no problem here, completely disregarding the fact that these are not the former president's documents. They belong to the country, to the American people, to be stored with National Archives. What do you make of this argument?
They seem to have ignored the government's arguments in the motion that was filed previously, because they made very clear these are subject to the Presidential Records Act. When President Trump left office and became private citizen Trump, all of those documents are the property of the United States government, and the National Archives and Records Administration is supposed to be handling those. The president shouldn't have them at all. So the defense that, well, you could expect to have some highly sensitive things because these are presidential records, they're basically admitting that he was holding on to presidential records that he should not have had. And we don't know how the judge is going to read all this. Remember, this is a different judge than the judge who authorized the search warrant. So this is a judge who had not seen the full affidavit and the full description of everything that had happened. But the government motion made very clear that these were government records, that private citizen Trump had no right to be holding on to them in the first place. So the entire Trump legal argument that it's okay to have sensitive materials because they're part of presidential records inherently, it doesn't hold any water in this case.
Okay, Paul Callan, another legal question for you, because of course there's the evidence, and then there's prosecutorial discretion as to whether they charge, given all the political implications here. But there are, as I understand it, aggravating factors that factor in to that decision. And I wonder, what efforts to conceal the continued presence of classified documents in Mar-a-Lago, either not report them, not hand them back, or conceal in another way, would that be an aggravating factor as prosecutors consider that decision?
Yes, Jim, it would be. And there's a lot of evidence that was presented by the Department of Justice in their filing suggesting that there was a willful and deliberate effort to deceive prosecutors on the existence of more material than was initially turned over. And remember, you had a custodian appointed of these records who filed a document saying that all classified material and all records being sought had been turned over. And when this search warrant was executed, it turns out that was entirely untrue. There were documents found not just in the famous storage area where these things were supposed to be kept under lock and key, but even in the president's, he calls it the 45 office, where he has a a pretend Intrepid desk, just like the one in the White House. And in the drawer of that desk were classified documents sitting next to his passports. So the representations made by his lawyers and by this custodian that everything had been turned over turned out to be false. Now, that could be viewed as an obstruction of a governmental investigation. Very, very serious crime under federal law.
David, the consistent argument by Trump has been, I declassified these in a sweeping manner before I left office. But his lawyers didn't argue that in this filing. And I wonder how significant you think that is.
Yeah, the lawyers didn't argue that. And they also said in their most recent motion that will be discussed today that, well, we will agree that the special master, if appointed, should have a top secret SCI clearance. Well, there's a contradiction there. If these documents were declassified, as the president and a few others around the president have claimed, then there would be no need for the special master to have a top secret SCI clearance. If, in fact, the special master, if appointed, would need that clearance, then the claims of these few people are obviously ridiculous, as most other observers claim, and as many other people who were around the Trump White House at the time claim, because there was no knowledge of any such order. And if there was no knowledge of an order and it was not executed by anybody, then it probably didn't happen.
Paul Callan, David Priess, thanks very much for the insight this morning.